Today's guest on a Life and a Living podcast is quite a fascinating lady with a fascinating background, and she'll tell you a little bit about that during the interview. But she's lived in many different parts of the world. She's the founder of the Zulma Reyo School of Consciousness, which kind of gives you some idea of the topic we're going to talk about. She's also the author of a book called The Inner Alchemy, which is the path to mastery. She published that book originally in 1989, and she's updated it in very recent times, and it's available to download for free. But she is, I said, quite a fascinating lady, a medium. She grew up in a family of mediums. She has studied, mysticism, Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy, and everything that kind of covers that spectrum. And she really, the whole purpose of the work that she's doing is to really help people to be and to stop doing and to really be, but also how she integrates that into the business world and the day-to-day life. But a really interesting a topic of energy and spirit, two subjects that I have quite a fascination for. So Zulma is just fascinating. You will be enthralled by her as I have been, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this. So sit back and listen to the very, very interesting and very fascinating and very convivial Zulma Reyo. Zulma, thank you so much for joining me today from beautiful Mallorca. I envy you there, although it's pretty nice here in the south of France. But thank you indeed for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege to be able to speak to the business world.
Well, listen, I'm looking forward to it because I think the subject that you're the expert in is quite fascinating. Just a little bit, you're the founder of the Zulma Reyo School of Consciousness. And whose purpose is, and I'm quoting from your website, is to transform a human being and give them the tools of self-transformation so that they can connect with greater wisdom and change the world. Wow, that's a mighty promise.
You know something, John, this is a lifelong dream. I've always wanted to influence other people, to share what I've lived, what I know, what I see, what I've tested, and come and join the party, so to speak. Let's join me and let's play at this energy work. For so long, it's been relegated to New Age, and before that to mystical schools, totally unrelated to daily life. And it is so basic to our daily living.
Yeah, I want to come back to that because, I mean, you were kind of destined to take this role in life to a large extent, because you were born into a family of mediums. So kind of was it inevitable that you would kind of dedicate your life to studying and practicing, kind of Eastern, Western philosophies and everything in between?
Well, I think it was destined that I would be an intermediator between what we call worlds, which actually is just one world, because of my abilities, my talents, my sensitivities. My parents were not at all into Eastern mythical or mythology or religion, which is what I specialized in. And from there comes my information, direct from, let's say, the ancient texts and experiences in meditation, different kinds of meditation, how they affect people and what happens. So this is, I would say, this is my own. This is my desire to have people to play with. As I said before, when I was a little girl, I felt so alone in what I perceived, and I had to keep it a secret. So when I grew up enough that I could begin to share the intellectual part of it, hey, this is what is, understand that this is what energy is about. Understand that this is what the physical body responds to. It's not just your head, not just your ideas, not just what is meant to be or what you're told to be, but there are certain laws that rule the human being, physically, mentally, emotionally, and of course, spiritually. And I wanted to decode all of this. So this has become my lifelong task, let's say.
And you talk about energy, and we'll talk more about that. But you hear a lot of people kind of using the word energy. How do you define it in terms of understanding what energy is?
Yeah, energy has been it's used mainly as a physical phenomena relating only to the body. And of course, our perspective in the school is much wider. It's like the human being isn't just a body. As a matter of fact, the body is what he wears. It's like a dress. We are much more than that. We are a consciousness. We are an intelligence, and therefore, energy is anything that vibrates, moves, that resonates. It's the living pulse, let's say, of life in all its forms. There's energy, there's force. Force. I'm very technical. Please correct me if I get
No.
too technical, because of course this is a school. There's a difference between energy and force. Force is more physical, more 3D, whereas energies can be anything, can be anywhere from the mind, the energy of the mind, and the energy of emotions, the energy of spirit,
Mhm.
whereas force is more physical.
Yeah, and I mean, the book that you've written, which is actually, I mean, it's a fascinating book, which I've got here, the Inner Alchemy. But you published that originally. I think I'm correct in saying in 1989, and
Yeah.
it was a big success at that time, which I think may have even been a surprise to you that it was such a big success. But it was a big success at that time. Why did you feel the need to come back and reissue it in 2020? I mean, obviously the world has changed, but what were the things that kind of felt I really need to go back and kind of add some material or change some material or review that book?
But it's funny. It's funny. Like I lost respect for that book. I wrote it so long ago that I didn't even think about it. I was more into its application. And I first wrote it because I found nowhere that contained all the information. Let's say all the devices, the chakras, the bodies, the energies, how they work, the mind, etc. And they were all separate books. Specialization is very much in every field of life. So I wanted a place to put everything together and give it a meaning, a holistic meaning. And so that was kind of an ABC. I wrote it. It did have tremendous success because nobody, you didn't have to go to very many books. It was all in one book. It was all contained there. And then I was set off to experiment and explore and apply these teachings, apply the world of energy into our daily needs and the world needs. And now it was really two people who approached me about this very same book, and I was like, ah, really? They were so into it, and they said, would you consider re-editing this? And I said, well, maybe. And they kind of convinced me. And so I spent a whole year in London revising the book and finding that there was so much that needed to be said that applied to everything that was happening with us during this world lockdown, and make it more relevant to particularly leadership, to those who inspire the world, and let's change it, and means how to change it. So that was the main uh,
Yeah.
purpose of rewriting the book.
Yeah. So so for the book itself, I mean, what you're coming with to a very large extent, and this may be an awful way of describing it, so I apologize in advance, is kind of a toolkit for people to actually really that they can utilize to really deal with it. And it's what do you want people at the end of reading the book or doing the course? What do you want them to be able to do that they weren't able to do before?
To change the way they think and perceive of reality. This is a big thing. Um, we perceive superficially, and I include myself as part of a member of the human race, superficially by effects, by appearance, by what's important to me as an individual, by what I like and what I don't like. And the world is much, the universe, the world, energy, life is much more than what affects you individually. And we are moving, and I think this is right after the pandemic, or let's take the liberty of saying after the pandemic. We're getting there. Is one world. Like we're just moving our values from product based or relationship, you and me together against the world, to a humanitarian, more service approach. And everything in the book is pointing toward that. This is what the school is attracting, people who are to, hey, let's not just contemplate our navel. Let's not just do something, a self-help book, even though it is a manual and it's not putting it down at all, saying that it is a manual. It contains many, many different ways of understanding all the gadgets that run us as a human being and that we may use to run our faculties and powers in a more deliberate, more conscientious, humane, ethical way.
And when you talk about it in the Inner Alchemy, you talk about it's about leading to the building of a more humane society. That's what you say in the book. So when you're talking about that, is that changing the way? So what are we actually looking to change our way of thinking from, and what do we need to change our way of thinking to?
I think you can use two words to describe that: doing versus being.
Hmm.
We are a society that is totally into doing. Everything is done. Even meditation is done. We don't know what being means. Nobody teaches us what to be is, except when you are deeply in love, or you have a child and your baby in your arms, or a kitten, or whatever. You just stop, your mind stops, and you feel life. You feel the breeze, you feel the silence. You know, this is the only thing we know of as being. The silence is between doing, let's say. And even meditation is approached, like, as I said, as a doing in order to create spaces in the mind so that I can go back to doing more efficiently. It's funny, but being in our school is what you are, what you've always been. And to get in touch with that, you need to go into the spaces of the mind, into understand what human emotion is, and have some control over it. This is something that people can't control. We try to control the world out there in order for us not to be, attacked, or feel badly, or bring up emotions. But the fact is that emotions are the spice of life. And so it's like reintroducing all these very human, natural aspects of our everyday life in order to discover that the one who is experiencing that without the labels, without the judgments, without the social conditioning, that quality of feeling life, not just the silences, your self experiencing life, and all the ups and downs, and all the ranges of energies, that is being. And to answer your question after a long time, is to stop all this doing in order to find these spaces of being where not only true perception of what is happening is, but where all your faculties and powers gather as a momentum and impetus to be able to actually effect a change.
So if I could play devil's advocate on that for a second and say, okay, well, I buy that. That's great. That's fine. But, I'm a senior executive in a large corporation and I have loads of things that I do have to do, right? So how do I, in that very, very busy world, I mean, to give an example, I was, working with the team a couple of weeks ago and somebody said, I look at my calendar for next week. I've got 30 hours of meetings in my calendar before I start the week, right? Now, that begs a whole lot of other questions, and I fully appreciate that. But having said that, if you take the demands on somebody, how do I marry this, whole concept of kind of being in the state of being, as well as actually doing all the stuff that I have to do?
Aha! And there we go. This is why I have a 3-year training program for executives. Because it takes time to switch, turn your head around. It takes time to be able to do both at the same time. I have a lot of things that I do. I'm a doer. I'm all the time going. Actually what do you call these? A workaholic.
Right.
And it's the place where you're coming from. In I think in the business world, it's changing from being oriented towards the results to the process itself. What happens within you, and what happens within the people that you're dealing with, you're selling, whatever it is that you're doing, your process too, is where they are. What a state of being, such as happiness, joy, joy, excitement mean? Does
Mm.
that answer your question?
Well, yeah, except I can actually hear people saying, "Well, that's fine," but I'm actually working at 100 miles an hour, and that's what I need to do, and that's what the organization is demanding of me. I do appreciate, on the other hand, the need for me to find that balance of being, and I'm just trying to say, how do we marry the two to get it to get that kind of balance? I don't like the word work-life balance. I hate that term, but in terms of balance in your life.
Well, I think we need to start by the upper echelon of people in a corporation, and communicate somehow that the importance of gathering your momentum and focus, the effect is going to be so much more effective, powerful when you have the forces within you at a peak. And this doesn't just mean mind. We're not dealing with throwing ideas at one another, which is normally what happens in the world out there. I mean, I went to university, I have a master's degree, et cetera, whatever, almost PhD. I didn't go through that, didn't want to. It's throwing ideas, thoughts, linear thinking. There's a lot more going on to life. So
Mm.
if the top people, CEO, which we're having some, which are coming to our first cohort, hopefully will begin in late fall, they're coming to go through this process. They're making time in their busy schedules. We've organized it in such a way that they don't have to really take that much time off, and start applying that little by little in your everyday world and in what you're doing, because we want productive, humane human beings. We want a better world. We don't just want to space out and go, live on top of a palm tree. We
Yeah.
want to live together. We want a better world, and we want a more efficient world. So we want the same thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can understand. I mean, and I said I found the book, which I said I haven't finished yet, but and I can understand. I loved what the content of it and all of that. I can imagine people going to your course. So you come out of that and you're very energized. How do you sustain that way of living beyond the kind of the initial, if you like, euphoria of the course or reading the book? How do you sustain it on a daily basis? Because
Here
it,
goes the
you,
second. Here goes my second aha. Time. You need to apply it. You need to be very, very patient. You know that we don't love ourselves enough. If
Mhm.
we loved ourselves enough, and I don't mean indulge, self indulgence,
Yeah,
I mean really appreciate. You can appreciate others, and you know the need for this space to integrate. It's not just a question of balancing, it's a question of integration into my whole self. And this is, I think, what the ancient world is has bequeathed to us. We have not paid enough attention to how ancient civilizations lived. They were just as efficient as we are. I mean, there's nobody who's more efficient than the Vedas. I mean, no,
yeah,
I mean, it contains everything: a way of life, a way of doing, a way of being. But we don't pay attention to that because we think we're better than they are. No, we're based on material facts almost exclusively. And it's a question of integrating, it's a question of coherence, it's a question of alignment with real forces, not just my head. We create a whole reality around this. We'll make a roadmap, which we put on big whiteboards. I do it myself when I'm teaching, and with the bullets and all the important points. But beyond that is you. You are integrating all of this. How can you get more in touch with you in order that this integration produces more beauty, more personal connection, more world family? I mean, we are a global family. That kind of is roaming around somewhere there, but we don't pay enough attention to it. So, to these people who are so busy and have, 30 meetings a day, video conferences, whatever else, is there is a way of doing both simultaneously. As I am speaking to you, I am aware of myself, I'm aware of you. I might not be aware of you if I wasn't aware of myself. I'd be aware of what we're talking about, but not you as
yeah,
the individual. And that's what matters. When
Yeah.
we're selling, I mean, I don't like the word, but it's what we do,
Mm.
selling a concept, selling a product, we are appealing to another human being.
One of the things that I really was interested in is that you talk about the three basic human powers, which are the thought, the feeling, and the spoken word, which I thought to me connected to the three basic points of reference: the physical, the soul, and the spirit. And in that section of the book, you refer to love as contains the maximum momentum of energy and the cohesive and sustaining force of the universe. I just struck me when I was reading that, because I thought it was very powerful, and I'd just be interested in when you talk about that love being the maximum amount of energy. But I just wonder, when you look at the world with all of the strife and the anger and the wars that are going on, does that frighten you? And do you think that we really can change?
Oh, I think we can change. Yeah, I'm a hopeless optimist, or I would not be teaching at my age. I might just go belly up somewhere, and just suntan. Um, it's my passion to communicate and to hope and to see people actually grow. I
Mm.
mean, to actually flower. This for me is the greatest pleasure, more than what I can feel with myself, to see others flower blooming, of the space that happens when we're doing it together, when we meet another person who is in that space. I forgot the other part of your question.
No, it was about the momentum of love, right?
Oh, yeah.
And also, does, with all of that, does it scare you when you see the amount of kind of troubles in the world?
Uh, the scaring is lightly, is it just really, it just baffles me. It shocks me, how this is tolerated, why this continues, not just why it happens, but why it continues to be supported and why it continues to reproduce itself. And love is the most powerful force. But let me explain that love is a state of being. We go back to the original concept of being versus doing. Love is not what you do, it is what you are. And
Mm.
once you're in touch with that aspect of yourself, in between the listening, in between the doing, this feeling sensitivity, you develop a sentient intelligence, which is the expression of that love. And then anything and everything that you do will be attractive and will create a cohesion instead of a disruption, disharmony, and all the other things that are
Yeah.
happening through war.
Yeah, and we talked earlier on about kind of the being and and all of that, but there's also the kind of that inner voice that chatters away to all of us, that we have to find a way in order to be. We have to find a way of quietening
You
that
have to
voice,
do
which
in
is,
order to be.
yeah, exactly. So what I mean for you, how what is do you find is the best way of quietening that inner voice? And let me just kind of give you a kind of a very real example of it. I was working with somebody there very recently, and she was saying to me that she walked out of a meeting, and her voice kept on saying to her that I'm not up to this. I'm not up for this. I'm not able for this. And she is more than able for it, by the way. But that was the inner voice. How do you quieten that inner voice?
Well, this is part of the chatter of the collective radio, I call it. It's This is why in my book you will see that there's these sectors where I work on the body, the emotions, and the mind. And the mind is perhaps what controls everything, but you cannot control the mind until you're aware of how you are using, provoking, and living and sustaining emotional heights, or trying to control everything forcibly into a state of supposedly peace, and the way that you're running your body in a gym, killing it to death instead of integrating with it and breathing with it and listening to it. So the mind is a very important discipline that needs to be mastered. And this is what I would appeal to. This is what the course I did in Brazil was concerned about with CEOs. It's like, what is the mind? How do you use it? How can you better use it? What are its interferences? What is needed in order for you to reach a level of transmission that isn't just linear, but it's a being state of mind, that sentient mind that I was talking to you about. I mean, does this answer your question?
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering what do you do? I mean, I'm sorry, I just realized as I was asking the question, what do you do to quieten the mind? Which is kind of back to the doing bit. I appreciate, but I mean, there's got to be ways. Are there ways to quieten the mind? Are there things that you can do? Are there exercises to do that really help to quieten that mind?
Breathing.
Breathe.
Breathing, but not the not just breathe. A particular form of pattern. It's the oldest pranayama in the world, and the Vedas taught us that. It's breathing always reflects the way you breathe. Shallow, we breathe shallow. It reflects a shallow state of linear outer oriented society, linear mind. Deep breathing stops the thinking. Anybody who does not believe me just needs to try it out. When you breathe deeply, especially to an even count, like the basic one is 4. In breath, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it, 1, 2, 3, 4. Out breath, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even if you don't hold it, in breath and out breath. It changes your emotional state. It gives you a state of balance. And if you want a quickie, that would be it. I don't have the pill yet. I wish I could have it.
You can patent that, Zulma, when you find the pill that it gives you the incident. But the other thing, to go back to we're talking about the inner voice, but also you talk about the body being the instrument of the greater life.
Yes.
And how do we honor that? Because I think it is something that is to be honored.
Well, first of all, we have to think of the body as a whole, not just its parts. And we have to listen to its language. We have to give it time and space. And we are not schooled. We're not trained. We don't understand what the body really wants other than pleasures. And then we tend to overstimulate the pleasures of the flesh, let's say, and instead of just listening to its calm inner voice. The body gives us all the energy that we require, the vitality that goes into emotions. You know, when you're run down after a big emotional conflict, it's your body's run down. Why? Because the energy from the body, the vitality, is used in emotions, also in the mind. But people are not used to connecting. So we live on this kind of stratosphere of the linear mind. We all do. And then the body kind of stays down here, kind of disconnected. So we have so many diseases. We don't really tap into our full potential. The body needs to be listened to. It needs to be cared for. It needs to have a variety of rhythms, not just frantic working out in a gym, but also lovely, slow Tai Chi, the Reiki energies, the all kinds of dancing. The walk, which is not with my headphones listening to a lecture, but is doing nothing, just listening to the body, just going into the body rhythms. We need to pay attention. We need to rediscover what the body's saying so that it can give us the fullness and we can lead healthier lives.
Can I ask you, in terms of, because when you talk about spirituality, and very often it kind of leads into, well, you know, spirituality, is it faith, is it religion, is it traditional religion? How do you view spirituality alongside traditional religions?
Thank you for that question. Yes, spirituality is being normal, and it's being here, present in the 3 dimension, with a healthy life, being in partnership, having children, rolling on the floor, creating fantastic project. It's doing everything. Spirituality is not removed from everyday reality. It is meant to be the carpet, the background, the backdrop for all of us, all that we do, in our lives. Spirituality is living connected to spirit in matter. I think that covers it.
So it's got nothing to do with religion?
No.
Oh, okay, no, that was kind of the answer I was hoping you were going to give, to be perfectly honest with you.
No. It's tried to sell, just like you get a company that wants to sell, like now everybody's selling these what do you call these masks, face masks, millions of varieties of it. It's just capitalizing on a state of being.
Yeah. And so, in your opinion, what is the greatest power in a human being, and how do you tap into it?
The greatest power is, we go back to what you were saying before, is love.
Mm.
If I am in a state of being, I love you. If
Mm.
I'm in a state of being, I'm much more intelligent. If I am in a state of being love, I am emitting around me an energy that brings serenity to everyone who listens to me, inspiring people around me. Now, imagine what that does to the leaders of today, to the influencers of today. If they could live this way, how much greater would be their influence?
Absolutely. Zoma, that is a fantastic place for us to wrap up here. Before we go, can I ask you a question that I ask everybody? Is the daily rituals? I'm curious with your background, daily rituals that you have. What are they and how do they serve you?
Okay, I align myself between the heavens and the earth, and I don't know what else to call it, cosmic force and telluric or physical energies. And I have a special practice for that. There's an animated version, quite nice, called the Master Practice, which is in my website and also on YouTube. Uh, and it might sound complicated at first, but once you learn it, and the principle is to connect myself between these two forces and to feel them, to open my sensibility, because inner alchemy is sensitivity and sensibility to these forces through me. This brings silence. This brings my integration, the coherence between being in this world and being nothing having to do with this world, being everything at the same time. I do that as a daily ritual practice, and from there I start my day. I do affirmations, parting from that alignment, not simply because I want to change something into something nicer, but simply because I affirm what I am. What I am, as the old biblical I am that I am statement come from. I am that existential, essential am. And I create whatever affirmation I need for whatever project I'm in, whatever I am doing. I will follow with that alchemical formula I am.
Fantastic. May I say before we wrap up, Zoma, this was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this interview. The book I'd highly recommend to anybody. Where can people get in touch with you? How can they reach you? We'll put it all in the show notes, but if they're listening, where can they go to?
Well, also the book can be downloaded for free. This is run by a not-for-profit organization. Beautiful people who are sponsoring me and this whole project, and so people can download it. And I am reachable through the website as well, which is www. I'm sure it'll all be written down. ZROC, which sounds like Zrok, Zulma Reyo School of Consciousness.
Well, we'll have all of that. We'll have all of that on the site. But Zulma, can I thank you so much? I've just found it really fascinating, really enjoyable, and it's lovely to make contact with you.
You too, John. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Pleasure.